Hello, I'm Karl Wells. My guest today is president of Pope Productions. Now, if you haven't heard of Pope Productions, you most definitely have heard of a program they produce. It's called Hudson and Rex, which is continuing to gain acclaim not only nationally but internationally. She's been involved in the art scene in Newfoundland for many years. She was a dancer, probably still is a dancer, and a writer, director, producer, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Lisa Porter to the program. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Karl. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. I want to start out because just before we went on the air, we were talking about this, and I had forgotten that you started the Ochre Pit Festival.
Ochre-fest, yes.
Ochre-fest. Tell us about Ochre-fest, because it's really interesting to me.
It's a festival started by myself and Rebecca Rose of Breakwater Books in Ochre Pit Cove. I have a converted church there, a beautiful church that my husband Paul Pope and I had bought in 2008, and we renovated it into a home with 5 bedrooms, but it also has a huge space. We kept a big chunk of it open. So there's a living room, but there's also a big studio space where we have retreats, and yoga retreats and arts retreats. And Rebecca and I were getting to know each other in 2013, and we said, we got to do something together in the arts. So we came up with the idea of having a book festival. And so 2013 was the first one. We've carried on since then. We've just had our most recent one in July. And the specialty thing about Ochre-fest is that we really focus on Newfoundland and Labrador authors
Okay.
and musicians and art. And we've had pop-up restaurants, and we've had wine tasting. So it's a full cultural festival, but focusing on Newfoundland.
So
and
Newfoundland
authors.
writers, but does it matter whether their book was published in Newfoundland or?
No. No, it can be published anywhere, and we can make exceptions. If you're a Newfoundland lover and you have a lot of experience here and spent some time here, we will certainly encourage people to be with us.
Or you may have written a book about Newfoundland.
May have written, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
But so far, it's really about supporting our local talent, both emerging and established.
So if I were to attend Ochre-fest, what could I expect to experience there? Author readings and that sort of thing?
Our format is often 3 authors and a band. And there'll be a pop-up art gallery. And in the afternoon, we'll have panels. So we'll have panels and discussions about authors and their books. So Friday night, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, panels, and a wine tasting by Lynn Henley we've had in the last few years. And then a band, and usually dancing and a lot of fun. It's a really intimate space. It's a beautiful, cozy, and intimate space. It's got wonderful acoustics and a really warm atmosphere.
That's great, yeah. The more of those things, the better, as far as I'm concerned. And it's certainly a great way to fill up the summer, if you're looking to fill up your summer calendar, you know, all of these events that we have around the province.
And it's a beautiful coast. It's a beautiful coast. It's a little less touristy than some of the other places, but I mean, you've got Northern Bay Sands there, and you've got Salmon Cove, and the landscape is just gorgeous out there.
Yeah, yeah. Now, let's talk about you. That's what we're here for. You were a dancer at one point, so did you start dancing when you were a little, you know, girl, 2 or 3 years old, or? Yeah,
knee-high to a something or other. Phyllis Angel School of Dance is where many dancers in Newfoundland started.
Yeah.
She was the first kind of big dance school.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the East End, and one of my very first best friends as a child was Sarah Sexton. Because the Sextons lived behind us on Ennis Avenue. And I loved her household because it was big and chaotic, and she loved my household because there was only 2 of us. And so we were both enrolled in ballet at Phyllis Angel School of Dance, and our dads would take turns driving us downtown because it was down in the old Cathedral Parish Hall there on Queens Road. And I loved going into the with Mr. Sexton because he let us be in the back of the station wagon back in the day, right? So Sarah became my best friend, and I really spent a lot of time in that household and met Mary. And of course, Tommy Sexton was around then, and he was an inspiration, and he was a hero, and he was a dancer.
Yes, he was.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, very good dancer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did the years and years of ballet, jazz, and I don't know if I did tap. I didn't do tap. Ballet, jazz, gymnastics, a bit of everything, and did all those concerts at the Arts and Culture Center. You know, I did get the bug, like many people do.
Now, you said there were two of you. You had a brother, and tell me about your brother. Was he arts-oriented as well?
My brother, Jerry Porter, he was a graphic artist. He did do some journalism. He was president of the Canadian University Press back in the day. He was pretty active as a journalist and a thinker and an intellectual. He actually worked for the Telegram for a year before he got a job with Munn Extension back in the day. So primarily he was a graphic artist, and he continued with Munn for many years and had a bit of a cult following among his peers. He was a satirist. He did many cartoons over the years, political cartoons. He had the first comic book in Newfoundland with Wallace Ryan, Zeitgeist, first ever comic book that was published in Newfoundland. And he was just incredibly smart and clever, and everybody loved him. He passed away in 2016, and he was a huge loss to the community.
Just to get back to dance, were you one of the founders of Neighborhood Dance Works, or were you just involved with Neighborhood Dance Works?
Not quite. It was founded by a group led by Kathy Ferry, who was a lovely contemporary dancer, and Lois Brown, who became one of my favorite mentors. Ann Anderson, Agnes Walsh, who was a poet, and it was founded as a collective and would bring in teachers and do collective work, and then it established a dance festival, the Festival of New Dance, in 1990. And I was actually programmed on that first festival. So myself and Stephanie Squires did a piece in that very first festival. And at that point, I had left ballet. You know, I was going to university, I was doing different things. Once we got into point, that was really hard. I said, I don't want to be doing that. It's not very good for you. But I really appreciate...
Not good for your feet.
Not good for your feet. But I really appreciate all those years of dance, because it certainly gives you an awareness of your body, an awareness of strength. I would recommend to anybody, any adult, to do ballet. It's a wonderful kind of dance training to have. But you know, I petered out like many people in their teen years, and then with the Festival of New Dance, I had started to get involved in more contemporary kinds of dance theater, dance. A lot of my work tended to be storytelling, a little eccentric storytelling, so a combination of storytelling and dance. And one of my first summer jobs...
You mean telling a story through the dance? Or?
With dance and with talking.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, kind of a poetic talking, or... because dance and theater don't necessarily have to be different things. I think I probably learned this from Lois. One of my first summer jobs as a university student was clowning with the RCA, the LSPU Hall, with Lois Brown and Marilyn Bernard and Kate Heaney and Terry Snellgrove and Janice Ripley. And it was the best. Like, how can you have a better summer job as like a 20-year-old university student? So we clowned, and we clowned all the way around downtown and Duckworth Street and in the park, and made up these little skits, and it was public clowning. So, and I was introduced to the likes of Lois Brown, who really made me give me a different sense of what dance can be. you know, not everyone's going to be the athletic person that is ballet, right? Not everyone's going to be the hockey player, but you can still play hockey and still use your body. And I started to develop a sense of dance as not something that's separate from your everyday movement. A lot of my work is exploring the mundane. So I think of dance as something that we all do, like when you get up in the morning and get out of bed, when you prepare your breakfast, when you brush your teeth. That's all dance, really.
So then at a certain point in your life, you switched and got involved in filmmaking. You made a short film called Baking Lessons, I think it was called.
Baking Lessons, yeah, that was my second film, I think.
How did that come about?
The transition between stage and film was pretty organic. We had a long tradition in Newfoundland of mixing dance and film because the community was so closely knit. The LSPU Hall was just down the road from the Newfoundland Independent Film Co-op, which was founded in 1975, which is having its 50th anniversary next year. We can talk about that later. And the community really crossed over. And I know Kathy Jones did film in some of her shows. She would do little films, and we called them filmios. So making films that were for stage became a thing. So it wasn't unusual. So I did one called The Plumber's Waltz, which I showed in a one-woman show I did called The Plumber's Waltz, where I had this character who writes letters to Virginia Woolf about being in love with her garbage collector. It's called Food, Love, Garbage Collection, and Other Ordinary Desires, with Rick Boland as my garbage collector in the film. And so once that was established as, oh, I can make a film. So then I made Baking Lessons, which was shot by Nigel Markham. He made all my little short films. And I think I directed that one, and John Doyle directed The Plumber's Waltz. So, but that's how that came to be. And Laurie Clark was the star as this beautiful, voluptuous baker who was basically giving kind of magical baking lessons on how to bake bread, but also basically teaching people, like the moral of the story was, there's a song she sings, which is, if you want to learn how to live without all that fools desire, inquire within. And that's her sign on her house, about inquire within, to learn how to bake bread, and also let go of what fools desire. So that was a lot of fun making that.
So, since we're on this topic, talk about the Film Co-op, and you say it's celebrating its 50th anniversary. Wow.
1975.
That's amazing.
It was found by a bunch of weird young guys who wanted to make films, and of course back in the day, film equipment was very, very expensive. Yeah, for sure. So no one could afford to buy the gear, so they came together as a co-op. And they started out at the National Film Board was their first host in Pleasantville when they had an office out there, and then they bought a building on Kings Road, and then they bought another building, and then they bought another building, so they now own 42, they own 3 buildings on Kings Road that look like little clapboard cute houses, but inside there's a state-of-the-art recording studio and mixing studio and editing suites. So it's really developed as a real state-of-the-art institution.
And would your company, Pope Productions, for example, use those facilities as well?
The great thing about the co-op, it is available to people who have no resources.
Right.
So you can go in and make your first time film and use the gear there. There's a sliding scale. If you're a mid-sized film, you'll get 1. If you're a larger film, you'll get a full rate. And so we use it as a post-production facility. So we do all our ADR and our Foley there, and we do a big chunk of our sound mixing there.
Right. Yeah. What they call looping and all that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's talk about Pope Productions. First of all, I want to talk about Paul, your late husband. who was such a great guy and made such a contribution to the industry here in Newfoundland and Labrador. You became life partners, you had a family. What lessons did you learn from Paul, and what did you teach him?
From Paul, I learned to let it go. The biggest thing I learned from Paul is to be a sponge, soak it all up, never stop learning, and to generously give it back. Soak it all up and then share everything you know. No one can fill his shoes. He was an extraordinary man. He was larger than life. He had a huge personality. We had so much fun. Every day was a party with Paul. Every day he would get up and say, what are we going to do now? And he always had a project, always had a scheme, always had an idea. And you know how they say in improv, you know, that idea of yes and? He was a yes and guy. Yeah. Like when he came up against a wall, that something wasn't working, you could see his eyes. You could just see his brain working. And I could see that look on his face. And he'd just be thinking, all right, so there's a wall there. What are we going to do? You're going to go around it, you're going to break it down, you're going to go over it, you're going to go under it. We're just going to deal with it. Nothing would stop him. So he had an incredible creativity and an incredible sense of camaraderie. I mean, filmmaking is not something you can do by yourself.
Well, I was going to say, you know, one of the first things I noticed about Paul was that everybody was important. Every job was important. No job was more important than another job. Every single person on the team was important, you know. It really was a collaborative effort for him.
You need all those people. And he made everybody feel important. You know, he may not remember your name. That wasn't his strength. Not mine either. Because there was a lot of buddy, chummy. And he was famous for that. Hey, you. And you know, he was famous for throwing people in the deep end, and it was terrifying. He did it to me. He did it to a lot of people, and you know, sometimes you needed to be pulled out. You know, it wasn't always great to be thrown into the deep end, but then he would throw you a lifeline and pull you out. So, and he had that line that I would say, like, hey, you look smart. Come with me. I got a job for you.
What do you think? I mean, to me, it's obvious, but I'll just ask you: what do you think his legacy is, and will be, in Newfoundland and Labrador?
His legacy is showing us what we can do. We had a very, very tiny film community. We had the privilege of having CBC back in the day, who was the only people doing any kind of filming or video. But between him and the likes of Mike Jones and Andy Jones and the early filmmakers, and later people like Debbie McGee and Rosemary House, John Doyle. I mean, he was the youngest of some of these people. I mean, he was 16 when NIFCA was founded by his older brother, David, who was probably 21, 22, 23, something like that. And Paul just went along for the ride. And then he dove in and became a leader. So what the legacy that he has given us is to teach us that we can do anything we want. And we have huge challenges. We have geographical challenges, transport, getting things here, getting gear here, getting people here. I mean, it's the same as every other industry in Newfoundland that we have these challenges. But what we do have is incredible talent and the diversity of talent. Because we had all those years where we were maybe insular and alone, we learned to use the camera. We learned to direct, we learned to act, we learned to do costumes, and we learned to do a lot, and I think we still have that legacy. And his other biggest legacy, of course, is just being an incredible mentor and bringing people in and encouraging people to make their own short projects. And we had so many young people working with us throughout the 90s. We did work with Canada Council. We did all sorts of projects for the youth before the internet. We did digital projects that were just in the very early stages of the internet. So he was a big starter of starting things. So, and of course, then there's the school.
Yes, I was going to ask you about, because that's like a physical building structure that really wouldn't exist if it hadn't been for the tenacity of Paul. Right?
Yep. Yeah, it was a group effort. The community was really behind it, but Paul really spearheaded it. And there's a famous email where he wrote Ray Fenley, who was at CNA as an instructor and an old friend. He's a photographer, but he wrote to Ray and said, "Ray, I need to know the DNA of the CNA." And then the government came in full force. We had huge support from the government because it was a zeitgeist. It was time. It was time, and we had Stephenville, which is an excellent institution that was doing animation and doing some filmmaking. There's a diploma program at MUN that's doing that has a creative diploma, and this seemed to be the time because we had so much happening. We had Hudson and Rex. We had Critch going. Now we have, of course, Saint Pierre going with Alan Hocko. We have it is a time, and one of the things that was holding us back is having the crew. You know, it's a chicken and egg. You can't get your crew until you have production. You can't get production if you don't have a crew. So we wanted to start getting the crew trained so that we're not just bringing them off the street, which is what we have done for the last 30 years, to say, like, Karl, you know, you're smart, come here, hold this, hold that light, you know? So that's where that program began. And once it began, it happened so fast. CNA worked so fast, the film and television community worked so fast to get the building, get the former Brinton Memorial Building, and get a curriculum development consulting group on the go between the CNA internal people and between the film and television community. So the curriculum was developed, the school was bought, the school was designed and renovated, and it was opened actually before the school was even renovated. So they crammed them into the CNA, and that was Paul's style too, right? Why wait? If you wait till you're ready, you won't get anything done.
Right.
You'll be waiting forever. So trust that you're going to learn it as you go along.
So these young people who are being trained now at that center for film and media, they're going to be able to come out and go to work.
They can go right in. There's a one-year program, a technical program, and then there's a 2-year program. That's the creative program. So you can come right out of the 1-year program and go work in the industry. You're still not an expert, but they have state-of-the-art, brand new equipment. I mean, when we did our first tour with some people from the industry, from the unions, from IATSE, and from DGC, and from the industry, I saw some envy happening. Like, wow, look at that dolly, look at those cameras. So it's brand new, shiny, state-of-the-art gear that these kids are training with. And for the first time, we have been able to have work-term students, which we couldn't really do before because, I mean, we've got insurance, you've got, you know, we've got, you can't come and work for us for free in a larger production. I mean, you may be able to do that in a small production, but for us, you know, we were unionized, and we pay people, and we want to pay people, But now we have an agreement with the school and with the unions that we can come in and do work-term students. They don't work for free. They still work. They still get paid.
Sure.
But it's everyone's on board. The entire industry is on board with this. So every production has had work-term students, and they come and they get paid and they can work on a real production.
And how did it make you and the family feel when you found out that they were going to name this center after Paul?
Oh, we only know a few tears. There's a few tears.
Yeah.
It's
the Paul L. Pope
Center for TV and Film.
Center for TV and Film.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful.
And I do want to emphasize that, I mean, he passed away, and the timing was there. I mean, it was announced just a few days before he passed away in April of 2022. But I do want to emphasize that it is a group effort and that everyone in the community has come together to make that happen. And I'm very honored that they named it after him, and he certainly spearheaded it, but he wasn't alone. There was the John Batchers, there was, you know, there was Alan, there was NIFCO, there was Pitcher and L. We have a really strong support community now in the industry. Like Pitcher and L has been so amazing. It's grown so much since I was on the first board of Pitcher and L.
Wow.
It was the Film Development Corporation of Newfoundland, Labrador. And Danny Williams was its first chair.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't
Little
know
known
that.
fact.
That's I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the province has been very supportive. We're one of the only provinces with an equity program. Like, they seriously invest in the industry, and it pays back. Like, it's a very good investment.
So that's a good note to end on. And I want to thank you for being my guest today.
That just flew, Karl.
It did just fly by. Thanks so much, Lisa.
Thank you, Karl.
And that's it, folks. Please join us again next time for Karl Wells Point to Point.
Wow.